Hi, Mary. Thanks for helping my project. Could you say a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure. I've been in technology, customer success for a while now, but before that, I was in sales. Before that, I was a customer doing all the implementations for software and stuff. That's the career side of it. Personal side, I'm from New Orleans. I live in San Francisco and traveled a lot in my lifetime. Would love to start getting back out there and starting to travel because it's been quite a long time since COVID, but that's a little bit about me.
It's pretty awesome. I was wondering if you knew that NASA is planning to send astronauts back to the moon.
I think I heard that somewhere. A lot of buzz recently with Artemis, right? So that's the first stages of it. So yes, I had heard that. I guess my question is, I don't really understand. I guess I haven't really thought about why is that so significant when we've already done it. Like, why would we not do something else, go somewhere else versus back to the moon? So that's, I think, is where my education gap is a little bit because I haven't really spent a lot of time kind of figuring that out or reading things about that. So,
And I guess in terms of alternate destinations, do any come to mind?
um, I mean, the big one is Mars, obviously. Everybody talks about that one. But I'm a Trekkie at heart. I'm like, where does this get us? How does this leapfrog us to that next level, right? Where we're actually doing space travel, where it's more continual versus just a hit or miss. So no,
Yeah,
no particular place, just around the galaxy, right?
yeah. I mean, in like the space community, I've heard a lot of like kind of conflicting thoughts, like what you say. I mean, some people are like going to the moon gets us out of low Earth orbit and gives us the capability, helps us develop the capabilities to go further. Other people are like, well, if you go to the moon, you might get bogged down there and not go further. So it's kind of an interesting discussion.
Yeah, yeah. It's like because we've already been there. So what did we not get the first time that we have to go back versus going forward? So maybe that's kind of the mindset there.
We discovered that there's water ice frozen in these permanently shadowed craters near the poles. So that's kind of a new development.
Yeah. So I would have thought we already knew that. So when they kind of mentioned that recently, yeah. Because didn't we discover something like that on Mars?
Yep, we discovered that on Mars too. But Mars is cold, whereas the moon, the light side of it is like several hundred degrees positive Celsius, and the dark side is like really, really cold. So, it's kind of
Yeah. Hmm.
not as nice as Mars.
Okay. I'll take your word for that. I do
But
think the pictures that are coming back now are so incredible. Like they just add this, I'm a visual person, so they add this visualization to it, right? That makes it, I think, will probably draw more people in because of that.
hmm. Have you seen any pictures of inside the cabin? They have a little mannequin there. It's kind of neat. You could see the guy in the back of his head and out the front.
No, I mean, I have seen when we did Challenger runs and stuff. I was at exhibits that had one of the Challenger like planes kind of there so that you kind of see it up front and close personal, which is kind of cool, right? But no, nothing. I haven't been inside anything, so
So when you think about the future of humanity, say 200 years in the future, do you think we're still only on the Earth and just making these little side trips, or do you really think that humanity might actually branch out and have settlements in other places?
um, the one thing about like the space programs is that it's the one area that I feel like so many different cultures can kind of come together for a common goal. I would hope that's the case moving forward because here on Earth, it's sort of not that way. There's, everybody lets their own business get in the way of really coming together. So I don't know. I mean, I would hope so. 200 years is a long time. When you think about where we've come as a nation, in 200 years. So it's possible. I think we have to get through some of the interpersonal challenges that all the different cultures, different countries have in play right now. Can't we just all get along? Like that is so simplistic, but honestly, what's the problem there? So maybe.
Yeah, it's amazing just to think back 200 years. We were horses, candles, outhouses.
I was watching, friends got me hooked on Yellowstone in 1883. And quite honestly, like 1883, I think does a really good job to tell you how hard that was, right? To go across country. It was hard. And now, and you laugh because your grandparents would tell you, oh, I had to walk 5 miles in the snow or whatever, right? Um, and it's not that way today, but there's a side of me that I am, technology has a tendency to make people dumber because they lose more of their common sense on how to figure things out on their own, right? I mean, Google's a prime example of that, right? So I would hope whatever comes in the next 200 years that we don't let ourselves really get dumbed down a lot. But we'll see. Time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I remember in like the 1980s and 1990s, I mean, you didn't, if you had a question, you had to ask somebody around you. Maybe you go to a
You have to go
library
look it
and
up.
you have to go look it up. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Now you just type it
I
in
don't
Google and the answers you get may not be right, but they're right there.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So the question is, do you research it enough so you get a really good agnostic type answer, right? You're not looking at biases one way or another, but you're making an informed decision versus just taking the first feed that kind of pops up, right? So, but who
Yeah,
knows?
it's like better brains or better tools, and you can't seem to have both. It's hard.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. Oh Lord. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, I am hooked on all the different Star Trek type shows out there. So I love seeing that. I love kind of, I hope that we can all get there, but when they talk about how they actually got there initially, where there was this big, you know, major Earth went through a major like change with bomb, nuclear bombs, all that kind of stuff to get it where it needed to be so everybody would work together. And I think our finest hours are when we have a really huge catastrophe that happens and we all come together. It's like, why do we lose that moving forward? Right. So why can't we keep a little of that every time so that we're moving towards that goal and it's not going to take some big catastrophe to kind of get us there? So, but I've always thought the space program kind of rose above that because it was such a difficult thing to achieve that everybody was willing to kind of put their heads together and work together on it. Even though there were these behind the scenes, US racing, China racing, Russia racing, all that, right? So,
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Despite what's going on in Ukraine, I mean, we have Americans traveling on Russian rockets. We have Russians traveling on American rockets.
right.
We are working together with people in Russia every day to keep the International Space Station going. It's
Yeah,
almost like a bubble completely disconnected from
it is a
what's going
bubble.
down.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know why this particular endeavor has created that bubble, but it would be nice to kind of roll that out to other areas, aspects of how we live, right? So,
Would you take a trip to space if you could?
oh, would I? Would I? Um, I'm not, I don't know if I would. I mean, I think maybe 40 years ago I would have, like when I was younger. But now it's like, do I need to go? Like, it's not on my bucket list, because one, I never thought it would really be achievable in my lifetime for that, right? Um, but if I go, I want, to just hop up there. Like, I was listening to an interview William Shatner did for his trip up there, and I thought it was very interesting because I think it was a little disappointing for him because he had this different expectation. And I think I have a different level of expectation. I don't want to just kind of pop up and come down. I don't, I could go do a theme park and do that with a fast roller coaster and get that thrill, right? I don't know if I have to go up to space to do that. And if it was space, then would I live on like a what's it called, the space station? Would I want to do that? It's very isolating. I'm very people oriented, so I think it takes a certain mental toughness to do that.
And of course, it may depend on how big the station is and how many people are there. If
Well,
you
then there you go. Yes, you're absolutely right. So that's true.
if it's what's that? Deep Space Nine, you might be okay.
Yeah, really. Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. But it's funny because there are so many things in the past that were futuristic then, but are in our day-to-day lives today, right? And so I never want to say never because that's kind of the history and that's how we've kind of rolled, right? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, for the right opportunity, I'd consider it.
Now you mentioned you like Star Trek and all that, and that you thought it'd be good for the world to come together. And I think in order for that to happen, people need to have a vision of what that's like. And I think for a couple of decades, Star Trek helped provide that vision of what that optimistic future would be. And
Mm-hmm.
even people who didn't like Star Trek were aware of it.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like today we have anything that sort of serves as that common vision of what a future looks like. It's
No, you're right. I mean, are you talking reality or TV shows or movies?
at any level. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think I think we were all like, wow, the world's so messed up, but nobody like there's
Yeah.
no common view on what good looks like.
No, and I think the only show that really does that consistently is the whole Star Trek series, right? So they've got multiple shows to kind of they keep that vision going. There's no other show that really kind of did it. I mean, I'll look at what I just kind of said with 1883. That was very violent oriented, whereas Star Trek was only violent if it was pushed to be violent, right? So that wasn't their primary directive. It would be nice to get the whole world to that one place, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Ronald Reagan said, if we discovered like aliens, then humanity would probably come together or something like that.
Well, that may be right. I mean, I look, I said this 9/11, whatever, hurricane, earthquake, whatever. That's when I feel like humanity is at its best. There's an empathetic nature to that, and that's when everybody puts all their issues aside and tries to pull together to help people. And I don't know how you get that on a day-to-day basis. I don't know how you get there for that unless you have something catastrophic that happens. And I'm not a doomsday person at all. I just don't see it. I don't and I do know, I mean, you have to have the right leaders in place to paint the right vision. And I think we've kind of been lacking that. We haven't really had, you know, Reagan, whether you liked him or not, he was inspiring, right? So I could say the same for Obama in certain ways. He was inspiring. And I think you need that from all countries to really achieve that goal, right? So I don't know. We're a long way off on that. We're still pretty primitive. That's how I'm viewing it. I think COVID kind of brought that out with all the craziness that came out with people on the streets and like, when did it become fashionable to join these groups so that you're going to go rob stores all together? Like,
Wow.
flash robs, So I don't know. It's not a good time. I'm not proud of that part of our history at all, but I am proud when I think major things happen and people all come together. And you don't want that to happen all the time to make that happen, but how do you sustain that moving forward?
I just wonder if, on an ongoing basis, a lot of people are like, life is difficult for me and you and everybody. And I got to where I am by making certain sacrifices and taking advantage of certain opportunities. And maybe there's a bigger like justification in the sense of, we really don't need to help each other. What we need is everybody to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. But then you have like one of these natural events happen and you're like, well, you're in trouble. It had nothing to do with you. It could have just as easily been me. And then you kind of, that whole, the perspective completely changes, I think.
It does. And I think to also add to that, I feel very fortunate to have been born in the United States, where we just take freedom for granted, because I've traveled a lot, and that's not the case in a lot of other places. And I think we have an abundance of stuff here that is not available elsewhere. And they're at a different level of evolution or whatever you want to call it. And so I don't know. I think one, you have to kind of get everybody on the same picture, right? So we may be concerned with climate control now, but countries that don't have a lot, they're not concerned with it. They're concerned with living day in and day out. But I do think we are a country that has a lot of resources. And if you want everyone to chip in, if you don't want to just give it away, and if you want to have that satisfaction, until you feel the satisfaction of working for what you achieve, then you're never going to put value to it, right? So, but there are a lot of things that we could do. I mean, when you look back at what Roosevelt did in the whole the infrastructure of the US, and at that time where he was putting people to work, you could do that today. Our infrastructure sucks, right? So it needs to be upgraded. So we should be training people for those types of jobs. In addition, tech isn't everything, right? So, but I don't know. It's will we ever get to the place that, I know we have the UN, but I don't really think of the UN as of a group of individuals that can really make change. They can condemn certain countries, they can do this and that, but they're not in a real position, I think, to make change. Not today. That's my point of view on that. But would we ever get to a governing place where the governing was really high up and you had the different countries reporting into them, so that you can have some common goal, vision, strategy, whatever you want to call it? Yeah, that'd be hard to do, but it's almost like it's needed to get there, to achieve that, right? So,
and taking that down to the micro level, just try to organize something on your own street and see how fun that is.
yeah, no, right. Yeah, that's right. So in your own little world, it's hard to do it in your own little world. That's right.
Yeah, just where are we going to put all of our documents and how are we going to organize them? That alone is like a major diplomatic feat.
Yeah. Now, of course, if you believe in reincarnation and you come back in 100 years, maybe then you take what you learned in the past, or if you believe in time travel, even that, right? So I don't know. There's the good, the bad, the ugly about everything. There's the good, the bad, ugly on technology. Like I kind of chuckle when that whole, what was that group that, the human technology group or whatever, all those founders of different social media type companies or whatever. Is it the human technology? I don't know, I
I
can't
don't
remember,
know.
but they're all like, yeah, we're a little naive because we didn't take into account there could be bad actors out there, right? I'm like, well, how couldn't you? I mean, that's our history. You have good and bad all over the place. So it is kind of interesting, which is why it kind of scares the hell out of me when all the robot stuff, if you don't have the right people in charge of the right product, things could go awry, you know? So, I don't put anything out of my head. I'm not over the wall on a lot of that stuff, but anything's possible, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, a hacker gets into these self-driving cars and makes all the cars in the United States go to one city, and it's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I mean, just that alone. So, yeah. Unless you live in your own little bubble and you're like, it's never going to happen to me, you know?
and then you look outside and there's like, an entire sea of cars in every direction, and you're like, I can't go
That's kind of,
anyplace.
I've never heard that one before, so that's kind of funny.
Okay, so you were talking about the 1889. So let's say that instead of living in 2022, you live 200 years in the future, 2222.
Okay.
Okay. And you're watching a documentary about the 2020s. What do you hope happens this decade that would be worth having a documentary about in 200 years?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Hmm. Okay, if I'm gonna pull this maybe more personal, like every season, I'm from New Orleans, right? A coast on the Gulf of Mexico, gets hit with hurricanes all the time. What can you create for sustainability in those types of regions where you're going to have annual, annual, catastrophes that are just going to get worse unless we turn things around, right? Um, so it's not just that though. I mean, I'm in California. I see the impacts every year of the fires and all that and what that does. So until you get everybody's special interest out the door, I don't know. It would be nice if by 2222 we had our stuff together on that, right? Like everybody, no matter what your interests are, you come together with a common goal to try to fix some of the challenges, right? Um, but until we do that, I don't. We're just going to be reactive to the situations and not proactive. So, for example, I've read a couple of books, like The Red Tide, which they wrote right after. It was kind of explaining the first chapter was all about the Corps of Engineers, right, and how they came into being, and very dry material, but you kind of have to get through it to get to the rest of the book, right? And it's very interesting how why that whole group came together, um, and what kind of came out of that, both from that book and there was another book that he wrote right after Hurricane Katrina. But I do know, like after Hurricane Katrina, there were a lot of people in the Southeast meeting with people in the Netherlands to understand how they've overcome some of the challenges, right? And I do think it's that sharing of knowledge. Well, this worked for us, it may work for you guys, right? But there has to be a level of, yeah, that works. Well, how do we make that happen? You have to follow through with it. I don't know if we really have a good follow through for the things that we've learned. It, so if we get there, then I think a lot of things that we're seeing today, we could mitigate the impact of the natural disasters and all that. But you have to have the wherewithal, you have to have the leadership to do that. And you have to have leaders that are used to bringing everybody together. You can't have leaders that tear people apart, right? So it's multi-layers or levels of what you need to kind of achieve that goal. I would hope sometime in the next 10 years, can we get there? I don't know. I mean, if I was 200 years from now saying, oh, we did get there, that'd be awesome, right? Because that's the only way we're going to kind of move it forward. If we're still going to be bickering with each other, it's just never going to happen. So I don't know, like the whole, and I this is nothing on the people themselves, but the leaders of one country overtaking the leaders of another country. Like, I don't understand that. I don't understand what more, how much more power do you need? Like, I've never had that need, but I do know that's a common trait for a lot of people who lead companies and all that. There's this level of, I'm not going to say it, but there is a mindset or a personality that works well in those roles, right? So I don't know. It's a lot to think about. Stop asking me all these questions, Nathan.
Well, Mary,
I don't even know if I answered your question or not, but that's it.
I see this series of interviews as being source material for that future documentary. Before we wrap it up, I know we covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything that you wanted to add that we didn't talk about?
No, but I do think I wish you luck in this whole endeavor, because I do think the more you talk about it, the more you bring different people with different backgrounds and experiences together to talk about it. Maybe it will help, you know. At some point you got to bridge everybody together for that common goal. And the only way you can do that is if you're not willing to talk to each other, it's never going to happen.
It's true.
So you got to be able to want to reach across the table and see both sides of the situation and come to an agreement. That's a skill that seems to have been lost in the last 10 years.
Yeah, the ability to talk with people that you may not like, may not agree with, and still make it work out.
Yeah, exactly. I think that has changed things a lot. If we could get back to that, I think I would have more hope going forward. But as long as we're so divided, it's hard to do. It's hard to make that happen. Because I don't want to just wait for some type of natural disaster or some man-made disaster, to happen for everybody to kind of come together. It shouldn't take that for everybody to be able to talk to one another and come up with like an agreement that works for everybody. So
yeah, and we kind of build that into our kids early on, in a way trying to protect them. But I just wondering if maybe the message needs to be a little bit more nuanced with like the whole stranger danger, and people you don't know, you can't trust them, and there's a lot of scary people out there, and everybody's connected, and you want to keep them safe. But at the same token, it when they get older, maybe it provides some resistance for them going up to some random person at a coffee shop and having a discussion with them. So,
or maybe having some empathy for someone sitting on the ground who's homeless because they don't know them, right? That's an interesting point. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't remember what it was, what the background story of it was, but I remember on 60 Minutes, they did this experiment where they had people who were in different political backgrounds sit in a room and talk to each other. And you find common ground on so many different levels, right? If you have kids, if you don't have kids, if you enjoy this versus that, you don't always have to talk about the things that divide you. You can start with talking about the things that you may have in common. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, something simple, maybe something that you doesn't, you don't get emotional about. You build confidence
Yeah.
and able to bridge over that, and then you could go on to harder things.
I took this course when I was in management a long time ago, but it basically broke people down into 4 different types of groups, and it attempted to teach you how to talk to people who were in different categories of the groups, right? So, and for example, if somebody always came into your office and needed to start from the very beginning to tell you everything, even though you knew it, and all you needed were like 2 questions answered, but they had to talk the whole beginning, you just have to let them do it because that is how their brain works. So you just have to make enough time in the day or the meeting for them to do that. And then you can ask your questions to get, the results that you need, right? But people's minds act differently. So people do have to be cognizant of that and adjust maybe how they approach something or adjust how, they handle a situation because everybody's different in that respect. Me personally, I try to see 2 sides of the story, and sometimes it's very challenging for me to take one side over the other because I have empathy for the other side, even if I'm leaning more towards one side, right? So how do you get over that, right? So I just look for the commonalities and try to figure that out. But there are a lot of people who are like, no, this is how it is. And you're like, well, okay, let's back up a minute, so you do have to take that into account. And I don't know if we've had the best role models in our governments these days to kind of let people experience that, let kids experience that, or teenagers, right? So they see that positivity.
Well, you
So
talk about it takes a certain type of personality. I mean, um, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to run for office?
never,
Yeah, me
never.
neither. See, I don't think any sane person would, which means you're
Yes,
only left with
exactly. I
one type
I
of
say that
person.
many times. Many times I say that. It's like the only people really want that. They may go into the office very naive, like I'll keep my values, but the way it is, you just it's hard to do. So a lot of people want those roles. They want what's that next step? They want the power. I don't I don't necessarily need the power. Yeah.
Some people would propose the idea of, kind of selecting like legislatures, randomly. Like you have to go serve just like you do with like jury duty.
Oh, like a jury duty?
Yeah,
You have to go serve on the local city council?
something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, that'd be interesting. Huh. Yeah. Okay. Well, write it up.
Well, Mary, I'll go ahead and stop the recording, but thank you so
Okay.
much. I really appreciate your help.
Yeah, no problem.